Alrighty, well, it looks like the time has come. We have all of our speakers up here, so let's go ahead and get started. First off, wanted to thank you all for joining us and continuing to join us. We appreciate everyone's continued enthusiasm into Subspace. Today, just wanted to give you all an update, and we'll be diving into Gemini 3 and also hearing some wonderful insights from our co-founders, Jeremiah and Nazar, that we have up here with us. Just to give you a little bit of insight on, as far as pacing and what to expect on this event. Obviously, we'll start off with a quick introduction. We'll be moving into a little bit of community shout-outs and highlights, and then we'll hand it off to Jeremiah and Nazar. And then from there, we'll do a quick update on Gemini 3, and we'll end it off with an open Q&A. So like most of our events, we will have a spot for questions. So anyone who has a question, there's a little spot in the middle to raise your hand. You can go ahead and click that to kind of put yourself in line. And you can also throw it in the chat on the right. If you don't see the chat, if you look in the top right of the event page, you should see a little text icon that will then open that chat for you, and you can go ahead and drop your questions in there, or raise your hand to come up and speak on the stage when the time comes. Beyond that, let's head into the community highlight section. So as you all know, we have had quite the amazing ambassador cohorts that we've brought on over the past year. At this point, the ambassador team is almost larger than the Subspace team itself. And they've been working, continuously to try and establish the core basis of pretty much a decentralized community. They've been continuing to contribute to various components that lead to that success, whether it be technical support, content creation, or even just being that core honest voice for the community and giving us that valuable feedback that we need to hear. Furthermore, they've been actively engaging in discussions to decentralize and elevate the ambassador program itself, hopefully ultimately leading to a goal of achieving governance. Though the ambassadors will have more details, obviously, to give themselves, we do have an ambassador call here coming up in a couple weeks where they'll be diving into detail on a lot of that. So please make sure to look out for that call as well. And obviously give them all an amazing hug and a shout out for all the work that they do for Subspace, because they are definitely a very integral portion of this team. Moving on from there, that's everything that I have so far. So I guess I'll hand it off over to you, Jeremiah. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Justin. Thanks, guys, for you and Fardeek for helping to lead this event today. Thank you, everyone from our community, for attending. I'm very excited to have the opportunity to speak with you all this morning and share some exciting updates about Subspace and get some questions and feedback from our wonderful community. I'd love to echo how happy we are with the ambassador program, the way that it's been evolving. And we really appreciate all of the hard work everyone has done within our ambassador program and across our community. We really look forward to seeing how that program continues to evolve and develop. Today, I'm just going to cover a few things. I'd like to start by just reviewing a few highlights from our last ecosystem update, which went out last week, the Stargazer. So our team has been hard at work across many different fronts. Our R&D team has been working on our new dilithium consensus. Nazar is going to be talking more about that. There is going to be a series of blog posts published over the next month that's going to describe that in much more detail. There's a lot of great resources on our research forum right now, and there's a work in progress research paper that the draft is available. If you'd like to learn more, big shout out to Daria and Dr. Chen Fang and all of our researchers for the help with that. Our protocol team has been very hard at work on upgrades to the core protocol around the distributed storage network and our domains execution framework. Nazar is going to be talking more about that in his update. Our product team has also been very hard at work on a couple of new products, mainly our Block Explorer, our in-house Block Explorer, which we're getting ready to launch and release to the community as part of Gemini 3, and also a lot of improvements to our unified or simplified command line interface for the farmer, which is going to be the default for Gemini 3 as well. On the people side, we've added 6 new team members in the last 3 or 4 months, and we're adding several more over the next few months. We also conducted 2 offsites. We had our first all-team offsite. First time in the project, we've gotten the vast majority of the team together. We had a great experience, a lot of great team building, a lot of great decisions made, and a lot of great output from that. We've got a couple more offsites coming up in the next few months. So those are some of the highlights from the team and the project over the last few months. What I'd like to talk about now is a little bit about what I've been working on. In this time, a lot of my attention and effort has shifted towards exploring applications and use cases for the Subspace network as we get closer to mainnet launch, and beginning to build out our developer experience and what our developer framework is going to look like. And as part of this, we have decided that this experience is going to be focused primarily on supporting on-chain gaming and blockchain-based autonomous worlds. So if you are familiar with the MUD framework in Ethereum, games like Dark Forest, OPCraft, these sort of things, this is the direction that we're really moving heavily towards, and what we really see as a big part of the future of Web3. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of a teaser now. There's going to be a lot more coming later, but I would be prepared for some exciting announcements in the coming months and some publications that's going to detail what this is going to look like much more. Some of this is some of the two key items I'd like to share is we're working on a new standard for interoperability across blockchain-based autonomous worlds across different layer 1 blockchains and layer 2s. And that standard is probably going to be released in the next few months in a work that we're calling the auto paper. And we're also still finalizing our non-technical white paper, which is going to describe the remaining elements of our protocol, including our tokenomics, how our governance is going to work, and what our expected roadmap is to mainnet launch. And this is also going to tie back to the on-chain gaming space and autonomous worlds and talk about how we believe Subspace can serve as a key infrastructure layer for this emerging space within Web3. We're also starting to make a much larger presence at events within Web3 and beyond. We had a presence at CES. We were at ETH Denver. We're going to be at South by Southwest next week. We're going to be at the Game Developer Conference in SF later this month. We're going to be at Consensus and many, many more coming up. We're spending a lot of time talking with builders, talking with developers across Web 2 and Web 3 and the gaming space, and getting an idea of what their problems are, what their needs are, their pain points, and how Subspace can help solve those problems for them. So far, so good. Everyone's been very, very excited about a scalable L1 focused on gaming and autonomous worlds, and they can't wait to see more. So be prepared for some exciting updates around that. Lastly, I'd just like to talk about Gemini 3. Nazar is going to talk more about the technical side of Gemini 3 and how it's different from Gemini 2. Justin's going to give an overview of Gemini 3, the mechanics of how it's going to work for farming and what to expect. I'd just like to maybe step back and give a little bit on the bigger picture. So there's really 3 major milestones that we're trying to achieve as we get closer to mainnet launch. So the first is Gemini 3 public stress test, which is what we're working towards in the next few weeks. So this is going to be kind of like the original Aries testnet before we had Gemini 1, where it was just a public, non-incentivized stress test to test our new protocol. And then next quarter, probably sometime in May or June, we'll see, we're going to be launching the incentivized portion of Gemini 3, which will look more like Gemini 1 or 2. So you'll earn pre-launch tokens or testnet tokens equivalent that will transfer over to mainnet tokens at mainnet launch. That incentivized testnet is going to run continuously until we launch mainnet. And so the amount of the token supply that is issued to that will kind of depend based on how long it takes to get to mainnet. But we will be working diligently on mainnet up to after that. And we don't have a specific date in mind, but we are working on it as fast as we can. All right, well, we're really looking forward to hearing everyone's questions and feedback at the end. Right now, I'm going to turn it over to Nazar for his update.
Hello, everyone. Nice to see so many people joining us on a regular basis. So I'd like to first recap a little bit about Gemini 2, what it was, what we had, and where we decided to move from there. So during Gemini 2, as you remember, we had basically a final version of the consensus v1. It is mostly like in the white paper, but there were some updates, and that's what everyone was using. We had an experimental support for executors, which wasn't enabled by default on Gemini 2. And we also had experimental support for DSN version 1, which was also not enabled by default. And both of those things were still evolving. and we're not basically ready for everyone to use yet. And we had a lot of learnings on engineering side from that. First of all, we have, with the help of some of auditors and researchers, we understood that the consensus, the way we designed it, wasn't quite as energy efficient and secure for the same parameters as we'd like. So we decided to design the new version of consensus that we call version 2. And there was also evolution of the execution layer. Instead of just having one chain, we decided we need something more flexible. And that's how we end up with the domains architecture. And our DSN had some changes as well. And closer to the product side, we had Gemini 2 Block Explorer, which was more like standard Explorer for the Substrate ecosystem. And we got feedback from you guys that you'd like to have something more Subspace specific, where you can find how many coins you've earned, how many blocks you've signed, and things like that. So we decided that we need something like that as well. And also there was feedback about the experience of farming on Subspace, where you have two pieces of software that are relatively complex, and they need to connect together, and it could have been better, basically, right? So from there, we have spent a lot of time on research. One big milestone that Jeremiah mentioned was consensus. We have went through several stages, basically like 4 different iterations. And the last one is called the lithium. You can actually find presentation on YouTube already about that, but there will be more information coming out in the next few weeks about different components of that. We have finished spec. We have collaborated with external researchers and internal. We had presentations that I mentioned. There is a draft for the formal paper, which will also be published in the future. And as I mentioned, there will be more details shared about that. In terms of research, we have found that a lot of that was happening more or less internally at Subspace, and we want to make it more accessible for everyone. So with that, we have a section on our forum Subspace Network, where our researchers are posting discussions and things they're thinking about. And basically, you can follow what is happening research-wise over there. And if you have some good thoughts, or you are a researcher in the Web3 space, you can also potentially ask something there. On the domain side, we have finished a few specs for a few domains, and I will talk about those domains a little bit more in a minute. And on the DSN side, we have there were some things tied between DSN and consensus. And since we have changed consensus, we had to change how we address data on our network, how they are retrieved, and how everything works. So there is a new DSN v2 spec that we are implementing. So a little bit about Gemini 3. That was in the past. How it is different. So first of all, with Gemini 1, we basically jumped right into it. And almost the first network, we had one small hiccup. But Gemini 1B was basically the network we went with. With Gemini 2, we were doing even better. Gemini 2A, what everyone knows, is an incentivized network. With Gemini 3, there are already 3A, 3B, and 3C. There will be at least 3D. There will likely be more. And we are taking more iterative approach. We are trying to release more often, and we are trying to get more feedback as early as possible. Thanks, Justin. This DSN is this centralized storage network. And basically, we are testing first with the team. Then we are adding ambassadors to the testing. We are collecting feedback. We are making improvements. If necessary, we reset the network. That's happened 3 times already. And once it's in a better shape, we will release it to the rest of the team or the rest of the community. And once everything is great and we are confident, we will transition into the incentivized part, but that will be a little bit later. What we have today in terms of the features for Gemini 3. First of all, consensus on the current 3C is basically version 2.2. It's like almost the latest one. It's a prototype, and it's what we use. It will be different very soon, but that's what we are going with. We also have 2 domains. One is called system domain. It's kind of like execution chain we had before. And there is also a payment domain, kind of like roll up on top of that, where you can send payments. And we already have a DevNet where you can kind of make transfers between those 2 domains. Domains are currently disabled on Gemini 3C, but they will be enabled on Gemini 3D, and they were working on Gemini 3C a little bit earlier. We just broke it. And also we have DSN version 2. And while in Gemini 2 it was an option, in version 3 it is feature enabled by default, and that's the only way. So what that means is when you are starting plotting process, you will download data not from the node, but from other farmers. That is basically the goal we were going for all the way, and it wasn't quite ready, right? Now it's a big milestone, and that's something that we are really, really excited about. What we are working in the immediate future is we want to have Gemini, not Gemini, consensus that we call Dilithium live on Gemini 3. So that's one of my biggest goals for the immediate future. And we will have 2 more domains ready. There will be a rewards domain. So if you farm a block or you sign a vote, you get the reward. Previously, that reward was issued on the consensus chain. It will change. There will be a separate domain. Consensus chain will be even lighter than before. All of those things will be offloaded. And we also have a great progress on the Ethereum Light Client, which will be also its separate domain. And there will be probably more announced soon, but those are the things that we are working on right now. And there will be also, there is already happening work on the more efficient block propagation. So if you remember how blockchains work, usually when someone creates a block, they will send that block to everyone, and eventually everyone will receive it. And that's how you can build the next block. That is not very efficient because most of the participants on the network already know about all of the transactions in those blocks. So there are more efficient ways to do that. And Rahul, one of our recent hires, actually works on that particular problem. And we expect huge gains in terms of the bandwidth saving and latency. What else? We have some developments on the product side. Stefano from Near joined our team as head of product, and the product team is working on 2 major things right now. We have Block Explorer, which will be, I think, announced very, very soon, that will have Gemini 3 in there, and it should make it much easier for everyone to track what they produced, what their current stats are, what happens to the network, with the focus on Subspace, not like generic abstract protocol based on substrate. And also Subspace CLI, which I think deserves a little bit more attention. We didn't have it quite ready for Gemini 2, I believe, but we have it now for Gemini 3C. And it's not just that Node and Farmer are in the same application, which is more convenient. There are actually other gains. So due to the fact that we have, for instance, DSN in both Node and Farmer, so like they both run a component of that, in the Subspace CLI, those don't have to be 2. They can be combined into 1. So actually, if you're running Subspace CLI, you should see lower RAM and networking usage and CPU usage. It should generally be overall better experience, not just from like usability of CLI point of view, but like overall for the system performance. So really excited about that. A lot of work was happening there, and I can't wait for you to try it out. That will be our default recommended way to run Subspace. But of course, you can always go to the reference implementation with separate applications if you want to. Yeah. In terms of Gemini 3, as I mentioned, there will be 3D. There will probably be more, and those will only happen when we need to do important upgrades. For instance, consensus change from 2.2 to 2.3. It's a big deal, and it just doesn't make sense for us to spend a lot of time for migrations, so that will require a network reset. And I think the last thing I would like to mention here is that we are really excited about some of our community members contributing code. We had some external contributors. That's really exciting to see. That's something that emphasizes the community part of the project. It's not just Subspace Labs team who are writing the software. It's also anyone basically who has the skills and interest and time that are able to contribute to the success. With that, I think that's it on my side. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Jeremiah and Nazar, for the very thorough updates. So as Nazar mentioned, Gemini 3 is already kind of in the progress. To kind of give you guys some insight into what to expect in the next coming weeks as far as what exactly that process will look like. As Nazar mentioned, the Gemini 3 has already been, 3C has already been deployed and tested, being tested by some of our ambassadors. We're currently in trying to do about a weekly, development cycle phase, where as soon as we get feedback from our ambassadors, developers take that feedback, implement the improvements, and hopefully get another release out as quickly as possible. So for the current stage, if you've been paying attention, you may have noticed that a lot of our ambassadors are already running on telemetry. If you look at the forums, you may notice they've been posting questions and things along those lines. Hopefully, with here in the next, as we continue to bring in more batches, we just brought in the entire ambassador team last Wednesday. We'll continue to get more feedback and continue to get Gemini 3C nailed down to a good, stable point, and to a point where which we can eventually release it out to our internal community here in Discord and Telegram, and then finally doing a full public launch, which we'll share on more public forums such as Twitter and everything along those lines. As was mentioned, this is not the incentivized portion just yet. This is the unincentivized, just testing it out. We're trying to make sure and ensure that it's stable. And obviously, we'll be releasing more information on the incentivized portion, here at a later time. In regards to the CLI, I would strongly recommend to use that as well. I personally, if you've been here for a while, you've probably dealt with multiple terminals or Docker instances or various other scripts here and there. The CLI truly is much more simple approach to go when it comes to launching our software. Literally just to download, initialize it, and farm, rather than all the headache that was anticipated prior. Moving forward with our product team, as Nazar mentioned as well, we brought on Stefano. We've actually brought on a lot of staff members here in the past few months. As one of them being Fajik, who is one of our new community managers up here. Fajik, did you want to take an opportunity to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Justin. For those who haven't met me, I come from OpenSea, where I worked for a year as a community manager, and until I found this spectacular project where I could see, I was really amazed by the nature of enthusiasm and engagement, and I feel really excited to join and look forward to specifically work on some engagement initiatives, both in Discord and forum. Not just in terms of sharing information, but also quests and activities that could foster more self-knowledge of the community across all the different groups, being the technical groups, the groups that work with content creation, and the groups that actually help us so much with the support as we have been observing this testnet phase. So yeah, super excited, and I look forward to stay tuned for the next news to come that we'll post in the following weeks. Thank you, Justin.
And as we mentioned, we have various other staff members that will be, you guys will be running into as we continue to expand our amazing team. But overall, that was all of the major updates that we have for you today. Plenty of things in the works and more information to come here as we finalize some of our various initiatives. From there, I think we'll migrate into the question area. If anyone has any questions, feel free to click the raise your hand button in the middle, or you can throw it in the chat on the side.
One thing we forgot to mention that not everyone knows, we have an engineering channel in Slack, which is basically public. You just need to apply, and then we can add you there, and you can follow all of the updates as they happen, rather than following announcements which happen less frequently.
Definitely, and as always, as some of you may know, we used to have that engineering chat within Discord. Internal communication for the team is now on Slack, so we did migrate it over to Slack, but we still want it to be open and transparent for you all. So if anyone would like to join there, just reach out and be happy to get that sorted. Alrighty, we got some questions here. One from Anonymous Black Girl will be, how often will we be hosting these community calls going forward? Great question. So if you've been here for a while, you've known we tried to keep up a monthly cadence in the past. As of this month and moving forward, we'll be trying to keep up that same monthly cadence of a monthly community call orchestrated by the staff and the internal team here at Subspace. But we also will have and ideally a monthly ambassador community event as well that will be orchestrated by the ambassadors. As I mentioned, we should have that ambassador one here in a couple weeks. So we're trying to get to a pacing where hopefully here every couple weeks there should be at least some event for you all to tune into. Alrighty, question from Big Jim for you, Nazar. What has been the biggest engineering challenge or challenges so far implementing the dilithium consensus?
Yeah, that's the fun one. So it is not fully implemented, so I cannot give you extensive list. But generally, it is not a very difficult consensus. Like if you assemble the pieces, the thing is that the pieces are complex, and one of the things I'm dealing with these days is the proof of space derived from Chia, which is one small component of the overall consensus, and it's written in C++. And C++ is not my most favorite language. I prefer Rust much more over that. And there were some difficulties for me personally working with that code base. But otherwise, otherwise it's quite fun to work with, and I'll probably have more updates as I finish that.
Thank you, Nazar. Do we have any other questions out there? No, this hasn't been asked, but I know everyone's probably wondering it. Could you give us a brief summary, Nazar, on kind of what the high-level differences are for dilithium versus, the past consensus that we've been using traditionally?
Oh yeah, that's a really great one. So first of all, conceptually, it is the same idea. It is still proof of archival storage. We are still archiving the history of the blockchain, and farmers cumulatively are storing all of that, and nothing has changed fundamentally in that sense, right? But we wanted to ensure that we can maintain energy efficiency for the high security level. And we've also found that it wasn't quite as usable when you want to retrieve some data from the farmers. So the biggest changes would be the piece size, if you know, like low-level concept in Subspace, like the things that farmers are plotting, they are plotting pieces in the end. So those pieces were 4 kilobytes before. Now there will be, I believe, 1 megabyte, something like that. On the current Gemini 3C, they are 32 kilobytes, so they are already bigger. So what that means is you will have to make less requests to the network to retrieve data. And if you want to, during plotting, for instance, and if you want to, let's say, retrieve a picture, and that picture is 500 kilobytes, then that picture will likely come from the same piece. So you don't have to make like 100 requests, which is quite wasteful. And it also requires a lot of time to actually find all of those individual pieces on the network. So with those things, I think usability for everyone involved will be better. And also, as mentioned a few times, it will be SSD-friendly consensus. What that basically means is that we are leveraging some of the characteristics of the solid-state drives. For instance, the fact that we can issue many parallel requests that will be processed very quickly, and that there is a low latency for data access. While on the hard drive, it is kind of encouraged to read sequentially. And with leveraging those properties of solid-state drives, we can make our protocol more energy efficient, which was kind of the goal. We don't want to turn the protocol into proof of work, and it generally should be a much better experience for farmers.
Thank you for that awesome explanation, sir. All righty. Do we have any other questions out there? Anyone who would like to raise their hand or maybe throw something in the chat on the right? We'd be happy to hear. We have our two co-founders, Jeremiah and Nazar, up to answer any questions you may have. One thing I wanted to mention too, you mentioned, Nazar, that with the DSN, we are now syncing from other farmers. If I'm not mistaken, that would result in that means that we can actually say that we've started to resolve the farmer's dilemma at this point, correct?
Almost. It's almost there. So there was one more component I forgot to mention. We had a challenge in Gemini 1 that we kind of worked around in Gemini 2, but not in an ideal way, where yes, we have farmers and those farmers can get data from somewhere, but we also have nodes. Those nodes need to access the same history, right? But they need to access them like from start to finish to sync from Genesis. And the way we did it before, we had to have some archival nodes on the network that can give that history to everyone. That's just generic way how almost every other blockchain in the world works, and that's how Substrate works by default. However, we can notice that our farmers already have that history. So why do we duplicate that feature? So what our engineer Shamil is working on right now, and what is actually already supported on Gemini 3 as an opt-in feature flag, you can actually sync from farmers network as a node. So even if you don't have a single archival node on the network, we can still retrieve everything we need to sync onto the chain from farmers. And those two things, farmers syncing from farmers and node syncing from farmers, those two actually do resolve the farmer's dilemma, because we don't need archival nodes on the network that will store gigabytes and terabytes and petabytes of infinitely growing history. So yeah, that's a really great note that you reminded me.
Of course. Awesome. Alrighty, we do have a couple questions from Ivan L here. Question from the community. Will tokenomics be available soon? And in conjunction with that is, when do you plan to launch mainnet? Maybe that would be a good one for you, Jeremiah.
Yeah, thank you, Ivan. That's a great question. Both great questions. Our tokenomics will be released before we launch the incentivized portion of Gemini 3. And that will be part of a paper that we're working on right now called the meta paper, which is kind of explaining the non-technical aspects of Subspace or beyond the protocol itself. I can tell you that, as we have said before, 51% of the token supply will be issued to the community in various forms. So we're still dedicated to being a community-owned and operated network. There are a lot of very interesting features, innovations about the tokenomics, which we've been exploring and discussing. And we're actually starting to work with some experts in the industry to verify some of these things. But the takeaway is, I think you guys will be really impressed and excited when you see the tokenomics and what it's going to mean for not just Subspace, but for the larger Web3 space. And yeah, we're hoping to release that sometime next quarter before we launch Gemini 3 incentivized. Regarding the question about mainnet, I can speculate, but I really can't give you a firm answer because there's, when you're building a new protocol that has a new consensus, it has a new execution model. When you're doing so many things for the first time, it's just really hard to actually estimate how long these things will take. But after we launch the Gemini 3 incentivized phase, our main priority is going to be getting the network ready for the mainnet launch. And of course, there will be many audits that will need to be done along those lines, which is also very difficult to estimate how long it takes to get on the schedule for an audit, for the audit to be complete, and then to fix the results of the audit. We actually are going through an intermediary audit right now as we speak for the current version of the protocol, and we've started to get on a more regular audit basis. So I don't have a firm answer, but like I said, we're working on it as hard as we can.
Thank you, Jeremiah. Question from EDB Baffled. What weighted the decision to focus on gaming and autonomous worlds?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about in some of the announcements that we have. I didn't really want to talk about that too much today. I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of hint about that and know that we've been working really hard on this. I would say that we really believe that there's an intersection of web-based gaming, traditional gaming with like Unity and Unreal, and a lot of what's happening in the blockchain space right now. And that the Web3 is going to play a key role in unifying and connecting all of these different industries that are emerging. And we really see that as the future of Web3, but that's going to be elaborated on in a lot of posts and announcements that we're going to be making in the next few months.
I think you gotta leave them wanting a little bit more, but we'll definitely be revealing some more details as we get there. Interesting question from Zoran, which we might not be able to answer absolutely, but his question is, what are you thinking about the most recent conversations around the ETH/security and how to prevent Subspace being called a security as well? I think they're regarding the cases with Ethereum being referred to as a security within the United States.
Yeah, it's another great question. So I can't give legal advice or make a legal statement about this. All I can say is that the regulatory landscape is ever changing, and we ourselves, Subspace, are a sort of unique protocol in that landscape because we're not the traditional proof of work or proof of stake. And our consensus model even does have a proof of stake component in it with executors. I can tell you that we are working very closely with regulators around our foundation, which the Swiss-based foundation that we're actually getting ready to file the formation documents for. And we have put a lot of effort into explaining how our protocol works, and that will influence, what kind of classification we get in different parts of the world, different jurisdictions. But I really can't comment on what that decision or how governments will decide to classify Subspace.
Thanks for at least diving into where we could with that one. Good question from Emil here. Technical question that he's seen in Telegram. Is there a dependency between plot size and CPU/RAM consumption? Another way to put that is creating a larger plot does creating a larger plot affect the minimum requirements for a PC?
I really like this in-depth technical questions. At least in the way it is in Gemini 3C, there isn't really that much direct correlation, actually. What does impact is the concurrency. So there are a few flags in the Farmer API or like CLI that can influence how many sectors you are creating at the same time, or like how many things you want the farmer to download in parallel. Those will impact how much network you are using and how much things will be kept in memory and processed at the same time. So those things will impact, but otherwise, the way Farmer works, it basically goes through the big file, and it, like during plotting, it writes it start to finish, and during audits, it will read it start to finish. So in that sense, it only processes a part of it at a time, and whether the file is very long or very short, the section that it works with at the time, it doesn't really change. So I don't think there should be a big difference. There is a caveat. The way generally operating system works, if you have plenty of spare RAM, it's not actually wasted, especially on Linux. It is actually like behind the scenes used by operating system to cache different things. So if you have a lot of RAM which is not used, and you type command free-h, H for human readable, you actually will see that you probably have something like half a gigabyte free, even if you have 256 gigabytes on your system in total, if you are running the system for a few days. So that just means that operating system will use that slack capacity of memory to accelerate things, but it's not a hard requirement that farmer like desperately needs it, or that farmer will allocate it itself. But certainly if you have more CPU and RAM, you can plot faster.
Kind of in conjunction with that, a user asked, is it possible in the future to implement GPUs to increase the efficiency of plotting? I know you'd be happy to talk about that as well.
Maybe. So the way Subspace uses proof of space component of Chia and alongside with other things, it's not the same and it's not for the same purpose. So the way we are using that is basically like memory hard hash function almost. We just want to saturate bandwidth of the memory channel. And with that, GPU might not actually be very efficient at that. So like the goal for us is to design a system where you cannot turn it into proof of work. And in that sense, we need to ensure that you cannot just like build ASICs and add cores and outgame everyone else and maybe even not store anything at all, just generate on the fly. So GPUs are kind of in the same category as ASICs in this particular instance, right? So maybe there is some benefit. We'll certainly explore that, and we will have some of the, how do we call them? Like technical analysis, basically, like studies, hardware studies for different designs and what they can offer. But generally, the idea is that the CPU and RAM that you already have, which has like 50 to maybe 100 gigabytes per second bandwidth available to you on consumer platform, that will be about what you would need, and everyone will be more or less in equal kind of situation in terms of the performance. It will be less. There will be less difference between the most and least performing plotters.
We got a bundle of questions from Avon L here. It's kind of 2 in 1. Is how do you plan to develop the subspace after mainnet launch? And will we be able to use unlimited disk space in the next phase of the Gemini?
Yeah, I can cover that one, Justin. So regarding, I guess, the roadmap in terms of the features, so in the current implementation of Consensus 2.2, we do have I don't know if it's necessarily a cap, but there's a default setting for storage that there's really since there's no incentive, there's no point in storing more than that for the stress test. So we just ask everyone just to keep that the same because we're just trying to stress test the number of nodes and the experience. When we switch into the incentivized phase, there will be no cap on the storage, and we'd encourage everyone to pledge as much space as possible to the network to enhance the security of the network. And that is how it will be at mainnet launch as well. So basically from Gemini 3 incentivized all the way to mainnet and beyond, it will be uncapped, unlimited storage, because that is the basis of our security of the protocol. Regarding the question of how, I guess, the features will differ between mainnet and beyond mainnet, I can give you a sneak peek of some of the roadmap that we're putting into the meta paper. We actually have a plan for a 2-phase mainnet. So somewhat following Arbitrum, we're going to start with a mainnet beta, and then we're eventually going to transition to a mainnet omega, or a final mainnet. And the mainnet beta, and that will be a hard fork, basically. That will be a planned hard fork. We don't know how long that will take, probably at least 6 months, maybe a year after mainnet beta launch, will we launch mainnet omega. The 2 key differences between mainnet beta and mainnet omega. So at mainnet beta, we're going to support vertical scaling to the extreme. And this is a lot of what Nazar had spoken about with Rahul and the bandwidth scaling. So we're going to be able to support a very, very high degree of scalability, far more than Ethereum 2 or really any other protocol out there today. And we're also going to support what we call core domains, which are domains which are basically hard-coded into the protocol, or you might say somewhat permissioned in terms of like what the domain architecture would look like, that those domains could support smart contracts, which are permissionless for sure. So you can kind of think about it like a parachain in a way. Parachains in Polkadot are kind of hard-coded runtimes. So that's what we're going to support, and there's probably going to be about a dozen of these core domains, which should cover 99% of the use cases out there. So that's going to be mainnet beta, basically vertical scaling up to the bandwidth of what a single node can handle. And then we're able to have, probably something on the order of 10,000 domains, which is kind of like 10,000 rollups. You can think of that in like the Ethereum context through these core domains. So there will be like clonable or spawnable. So you could have like a payments domain, and then somebody can come in and just change the defaults for that payment domain, or like change the token for that. And then when we get to mainnet beta, mainnet omega, there's going to be two main upgrades, which we're going to deploy, and those might even come incrementally. They might not come at the same time. The first is going to be support for open domains, which actually does not require a hard fork. Open domains will allow anyone to deploy a domain on the network as easily as deploying a smart contract on Ethereum. And then the second one is going to be horizontal scaling, which is basically data sharding. We already have architected our data sharding. We've actually already built in the support for data sharding with our new archiving framework as part of Consensus v2. It's based on some papers from some researchers we're working with, and also a lot of interesting work which was done in the Ethereum ecosystem, even some posts that Vitalik himself made about this idea. And that will basically provide for, practically speaking, unlimited bandwidth scaling, unlimited horizontal scaling of Subspace. So instead of 10,000 domains, we'd be able to support something like 10 million domains and really be web scale. The decision to do this was based on the complexity of this implementation and just deciding to try to launch mainnet as soon as possible. And yeah, that's an overview. For more, I just wait until we get the paper out.
Jeremiah? Question we have from another one from Ivan, as right after that was, do we plan to create an app for Android or iOS to utilize cloud storage in the future? I think that would be a great application to see.
It's funny that you asked that. Actually, Subspace started as an app for farming. We don't have any plans to build that in-house, but it would be very easy for someone to build that if they wanted to. Part of the experimentation we found is that actually doesn't work out so well in practice because of the battery life for that and the network bandwidth that consumes, especially for people that have to pay for their bandwidth or on like a data plan. So we don't believe that that's going to be the main way that people are going to pledge space to the network, but it's certainly possible for somebody to build that. And we might support building something like that in the future, perhaps through a grant.
I think you interpreted that as a farmer on the phone, right? Which is an interesting idea. Like we were joking about that in the past, that you'll have like all these Android phones that are no longer receiving security updates, but they can do still something. I think the other way to interpret that question is whether there will be some app to access data on Subspace. And that is certainly something that would be possible to do with some of the libraries and SDKs we'll be releasing. And the idea would be that regular apps that are not blockchain affiliated would still be able to leverage Subspace if they want to, as a storage provider, for instance. But ideally, we wouldn't build all of those ourselves. It's up to the community and ecosystem to do.
Kind of in that same lane, combination question from Leo25 and Emil. Leo asked, are there any NFT projects being prepared on Subspace, and if so, which collections? And Emil added to that question saying, in addition, is storing NFTs still one of the use cases for Subspace besides autonomous worlds? And are there any planned collabs with NFT marketplaces?
Yeah, those are great questions. So autonomous worlds and on-chain games are really just nothing but NFT collections, to be quite honest. They're NFT collections for avatars, for in-game items, and even for the world itself. So absolutely, NFTs are a key component of anything to do with our roadmap around on-chain gaming and autonomous worlds. We are absolutely planning to support that. What's different is the kind of interoperability standards that we see as necessary to really make that work, which is actually just elaborations on standards other people have already been working on within the Ethereum community. We're trying to make that work more in a cross-chain setting. So yeah, absolutely, that's a big part of what we're doing. It hasn't changed. Everything around NFT storage, NFT metadata. We're just being much more specific about what types of NFTs you could say that we're storing, and making sure that those NFTs are very composable and interoperable. We do not have any plans right now to do anything in the work for collections, but we have started talking with game developers and projects. So if you want to call that an NFT collection, but not something like a Bored Ape Yacht Club or CryptoPunks type collection.
And it looks like the last one that I have is from Mr. Sinister. He said, in the previous testnet, it happened that the storage did not have a certain speed and was always close to synchronization and ended up idling. Is it possible to introduce pre-testing for equipment in the case of unsuitable conditions? Sounds like he's looking for...
Yeah, I think that's a usability kind of challenge that we have. Some things are not quite always working the way we expect, and that's part of the reason why we are not rolling out Gemini 3C right away for the whole community, right? We are testing with our team internally, trying to make sure it works for us at least. Then we are starting with technical ambassadors, other ambassadors, and then the community, such that by the time we get to the community, the experience is hopefully better. But it's an interesting idea to have like a benchmarking kind of command, right? That you can write, you can run, and then see some kind of metric. If it's good enough or not good enough hardware, like what kind of numbers you are getting. Yeah, we'll probably have something like that. That's a very good idea.
All righty. I think that's all of the questions we had so far. Did we want to put out a final call for anyone who has any lingering questions in our last couple minutes here? Typing coming through. Alrighty, it looks like that is, I think, all of our questions. So I think we are good to close it out. Thank you all for coming. Jeremiah, Nazar, thank you for taking the time to answer all these amazing questions and give all of your amazing updates. Was there any closing thoughts you guys wanted to conclude with?
Oh, just a big thank you to everybody for attending. I really appreciate all the questions, all the feedback, and thank you, Justin and Pradeep, for running this event.
Yep, technical questions are great. Keep them coming.
Alrighty, everybody. Well, thanks again for joining. We appreciate all of your time and attention today, and I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and we will be back at it, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.